Thank you, everyone. Slides, awesome. So I understand that all of you are giving up riding on a tiny train to be here in my talk. So I just want to give you appreciation around that. For those of you who have not ridden on the tiny train, it is one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. It goes through a little tunnel. It's wonderful. So do get on the tiny train if you haven't done that already. So my name's Paul, I'm at PJF on Twitter, and I am a person who is not very good at being productive. One of the problems that I have... Oh, why has my slide not advanced? Let's just try, and there we go. So I am somebody who is not very productive naturally. I spend a lot of time procrastinating. I'm very, very easily distracted. I have a terrible, terrible memory. And consequently, for me, some sort of task management system is absolutely essential. If I don't have something which is recording what I need to be doing and when I should be doing it, I get nothing done. I will get distracted and ride a tiny train all day. Now, I have tried absolutely dozens of systems. I have gone through applications, I've gone through web systems, I've gone through things that work sort of, just on my computer. And what I've found almost universally is that anything that claims to be simple and easy ends up missing features. I end up outgrowing it. I want to do more than it's capable of. Anything which is a proprietary system, I can't add features to it. There's always going to be things which I want to do which my task management system wasn't designed for. And I have a long history of sort of hacking things in to third-party proprietary task management systems, but they've really been hacking things in. And they're not necessarily stable, they don't feel like a good idea, they break easily, there are sharp edges. The other thing is that people don't tend to write management software for people like me. They tend to be apps on a phone or a website, there's some sort of a back end, but I live on the command prompt. I live in my shell. I spend all my time doing things in a terminal. So when I heard about TaskWarrior, which is a shell-based text-oriented task management system, I celebrated. I thought, finally, somebody's written something for me. And my friends are like, yeah, you'd probably like it, Paul, but it's got a bit of a learning curve. And I'm like, hey, I play Dwarf Fortress. It is the most ludicrously hard to play game. If you ever thought that like learning all the AWS APIs was hard, Dwarf Fortress is just ridiculous. I'm like, I can handle a learning curve. But I do want to acknowledge that most task systems don't work for most people. If anyone's ever come up to you and said, oh my goodness, I've found this thing called a bullet journal and it's fantastic, and then you've tried it and it didn't work for you, it's because these sorts of things are incredibly personal. And even though TaskWarrior is workflow agnostic, there is a good chance that it won't be something that you will enjoy. So this is a great talk to find out if this is something which you go, oh my goodness, it's amazing, or you go, that's terrible, why would anyone ever use that? If TaskWarrior is for you, then if you're like me, it'll be the most beautiful thing you have ever seen in your life, which is up there with this amazing sweater of Buzz Lightyear that a friend of mine posted on Facebook, and which I then tracked down at the thrift store so I could now own that. And I have traveled around the world, it's a little bit warm today, wearing my amazing Buzz Lightyear sweater. The other thing is that TaskWarrior has an awful lot of things which it can do. Here is the sort of command reference for it. There's no chance that I can cover all of these in a 45-minute talk. So instead, I'm just going to jump into some examples and show you the things which I use most often. So what is the first thing you want to do with any sort of task management system? You want to say, here's a task I want to get done. To do that, we use TaskWarrior on the command line. We say task add what it is that we want to be doing. And it's like, okay, I made task number 1. I can add some more tasks to it. I want to book a hotel, and I want to write a talk on TaskWarrior. So now I've got tasks number 2 and tasks number 3. So every task in TaskWarrior has a human-friendly ID that is sequentially incremented from 1. If I just write task, then TaskWarrior shows me all the things I need to be doing. So I've got buy plane tickets, book a hotel, write a talk on TaskWarrior. They've got their ID, how old they are, and this thing called urgency, which I'll come back to later, how urgent TaskWarrior thinks these tasks are. So far, so good. To complete a task, simple. Task, the task ID, and the word done. And it says, okay, I've now done that task. Now, one thing to note here is if I then ask TaskWarrior what tasks do I have left, the tasks have renumbered themselves. So now, task number 1 is book a hotel, task number 2 is writing a talk on TaskWarrior. So you can turn this off if that is something which you want, but TaskWarrior will renumber tasks so they're always small numbers, they're easy to manage with. If you're writing something like a shell script, for example, or some sort of a plugin, there are also UUIDs, universally unique identifiers, which machines can use. So there are unique ways to identify tasks as well. But tasks renumber themselves. So that's great, but sooner or later I want to organize my tasks. If I just want a great big list of tasks with no ordering, I could just have a text file for that. So TaskWarrior supports the idea of tags. Tags are unstructured many-to-many constructs. So one task can have many tags, and one tag can be applied to many tasks. To give you some examples of how to use tags, we just put a plus and then anything we want as my tag after it. And so here I've added a shopping task, buy a mini screwdriver set, I've tagged it with shopping. Here I've said, oh, I want to ping my client on their invoice payment, and I've tagged that with phone and Cyberdyne. So it's very, very easy to create tags. You don't have to declare them first. You can just add them. You can also remove tags if you want to. So let's say that I made a mistake with my client. I meant to tag Shinra rather than Cyberdyne. I can say, hey, the last task that I added, and that is a meta tag, latest there, I want to modify that. I want to remove Cyberdyne. I want to add Shinra as tags. So you can add and remove tags after a task has been created. In fact, you can modify a task any way you want after it's been created. So why are tags good? Tags are good because they are great for searching on particular things. They're great for organizing your tasks. I don't like making telephone calls. I really don't enjoy it. And if I'm going to make one telephone call, I would rather know all the telephone calls I need to make so I can get them all done one after the other. That's a very easy thing for me to do in TaskWarrior. I just say task plus phone. There's all of my things which require a telephone call. What else do I use these for? If a resource is needed, that might mean me being on a particular site or in a particular city, people involved. I also have tags for costly tasks. If I have something like cancel a subscription, where that will cost me money if I don't take an action there, then I want those to have a little bit more urgency. And I'll talk more about urgency later. You can assign urgencies to tags. The thing which I found this most useful for, however, is tagging coworkers, tagging people. And this is so when I have a meeting with someone, I know all the things I need to discuss with them. Now, of course, I'm much too lazy to type in someone's name, so I'll do things like this. Alias EJ is task plus Emma Jane. And Emma Jane was my manager in my previous contract role that I did. And every time we had a meeting, I just typed EJ at the console, and I would see everything which I needed to discuss in that meeting. And then once I'd discussed that, I would remove that tag from each task, so I wouldn't try to discuss it again. TaskWarrior also has automatic meta tags. So if you have tasks which have a due date, you can say, show me all the tasks due in the next year, or in the next quarter, or in the next month. So these are all meta tags which TaskWarrior gives you. You can also search for the absence of meta tags. I will often say, please find all the tasks which are not scheduled. I haven't picked a time when I intend to do that. Or all the tasks which are missing a project or missing an expiry date. Now, of course, this brings us nicely into the idea of another way of sorting tasks, which is to use projects. So tags are sort of, you can throw them anywhere, and they're just free-form fields. Projects, on the other hand, are hierarchical. So you can have a project which has sub-projects, which has sub-sub-projects. I use these a lot when I'm traveling. So every time I do a trip, and I do a lot of traveling, 4 to 6 months of travel a year, I will have a project for that trip. So I might have project, travel, Mordor, and then sub-projects under that if I'm traveling to Mordor. So here I've got book, Mordor transport. That's in my travel Mordor logistics project. Book some accommodation, also in that logistics project. Renew a visa for going to Mordor. That's in travel Mordor legal. So I have these subcategories as required. One of the most satisfying things of having projects is when you complete a task in a project, it will say, hey, travel Mordor logistics is now 50% complete. You can actually see yourself getting closer to that goal. That might not work for you, but it definitely works for me, saying, yes, I've finally unpacked 90% of the boxes that I've meant to unpack, or I've done 70% of this project. Projects are also fantastic anytime you have a multi-step task. If you have a task which involves doing 5 things, put all those 5 things in a project, and it makes it much, much easier to track all of them. Of course, TaskWarrior also, you can just say task projects, and it shows you all of the projects which you have. This is a very small snippet of all the ones which I have, and it shows you how many tasks you have in each. If you wanted to get all of my travel tasks, I can do that, task project travel. If I wanted to get all of my travel tasks for a particular trip, I can do that here, task project travel.mordor. This is incredibly useful because as I get closer to my travel date, I can quickly see what have I missed, what do I have left to do for this trip. If you're doing something like moving a house, projects are perfect. You can have moving.mail, moving.packing, moving.utilities, so on and so forth. The other very powerful thing which you can do with projects and tags and all of these things is you can define a context. So rather than me having a separate TaskWarrior installation for each of my clients and for home and for Dwarf Fortress and other things I do for fun, I have everything in the one TaskWarrior instance. And what I do is I define some contexts so I only see the things I care about. So here I've defined a context called work, which is simply anything in the project of work. And of course, each client has their own sub-project inside there. Here I've got a context for Cyberdyne, so one of my clients, and I can say project work.cyberdyne, I'll only see their tasks. So when I'm working for them or I have a scheduled day working for them, I only see their tasks. Here I have a complex one. Here I'm searching for personal tasks. Now, these are tasks which are not in the project work. They don't have a project starting with fun. I'm not looking for my Dwarf Fortress games. These are boring things like paying bills or sorting out visas. So not in the project fun and not tagged with fun. And so that gives me all of my personal stuff. And then, of course, finally, if I want to relax, show me everything which is tagged with fun or in the project fun. And that'll be like, hey, Paul, you should watch this YouTube video. Or here's a picture of a cat that someone sent you via email. To switch contexts, you can simply say task context and what you want to switch into. But this is much, much better with aliases. In fact, everything in TaskWarrior is better with shell aliases. So I can have aliases for Cyberdyne and personal and fun, and then when I want to relax, I just type fun into my console, and now I will see all the tasks that I've written down which I consider to be fun. And of course, there are ways to list tasks, list contexts, show your current context, and remove your context if you want to. More things which TaskWarrior lets you do, it lets you take notes on your tasks. It's very, very important to me that I can not complete a task, but I can write a note if there's been some sort of progress. And in TaskWarrior, these are called annotations. To annotate a task is very straightforward. Task, whatever identifies that task, usually by its number, the word annotate, and then what I want to write down as an annotation. So here I've said, don't forget to discuss annotations as my example there. Annotations are usually 1 or 2 lines long. They're not very long things. I'll show you a little bit later on in this talk how you can have much larger annotations. The things with annotations is because they are so short, whenever you get a list of tasks, if something is annotated, it will show you those annotations right next to the task. Now, this is great, but it can also get messy. So I'll show you in a moment there's a way of turning that off. One thing to note there is that they auto timestamp themselves. So you don't have to record when the annotation was made, it will record that for you all the way down to the second. And if you do something like you're, trying to sort out an insurance payment, for example, I hope you never have to do that, you want to keep a paper trail of everything going on. And annotations are perfect for keeping those paper trails, to know exactly what you've done at each step of the way. Now, as I mentioned, they show by default, but you can actually hop into your TaskWarrior RC file, and you can say that instead of showing descriptions, I want description.count. And all that does is it counts out the number of annotations, and it puts it in square brackets at the end of each task. So I can see which tasks are annotated and how many annotations are there. If I actually want to see what those annotations are, I can write task and the name of the task, or the identifier of the task, and I get this huge page of information, of which I get up here the actual annotations that I've written down, and everything else which I might want as well, the UUID, the virtual tags, when it was modified, what its urgency is, and so on. One of the most useful things that annotations are for is recording why a task got completed. So you can do things like this: task 31 done, talk completed, or task 23 delete, project cancelled. What these will do is they will mark the task as done, or they will mark the task as deleted, and they will add an annotation at the same time. Now, why would you want to ever do that? Well, let's say that somebody comes to you and says, Paul, when you worked on this project, you said that that was finished, but why was that finished? I can go back to my notes and I can see. So this allows me to complete something or delete something, add an annotation at the same time. What else do we want to do with tasks? Well, very often we want to work with dates. We want to have due dates. We want to have dates after which they're no longer relevant. There might be all sorts of things to do with dates. So a typical thing that involves a date is sending a birthday card. So let's say that I want to send my dad a birthday card, and I don't want to have that on my task list at the moment because my dad's birthday isn't until December. And it's just going to bother me if I see that on my task list the whole time. So I can say, wait until this date. That says hide until. So wait says hide until this date, don't show me the task. So I can ignore tasks which are not relevant yet. If I want to see what tasks are waiting, I can do that very easily with tasks waiting. I can also use relative dates. So I can do things like task 42 modify, wait until tomorrow. This is something I use all the time. I want to put off this task until tomorrow. I don't want to be reminded about it right now. You can also do things like task 42 modify, wait until 5 days from now. So if you want to, you can schedule things to be in 2 days' time or 3 days' time. What other things can we do with dates? So let's say I want to send my dad a birthday card. I can say hide the task until this date and then schedule it to do it on this date. This is an intent for me to do the task on that particular date. So I want it to show up on my task list on the 12th, but I want to really be sending that card on the 15th. And what schedule does is it gives the task an urgency boost after that date. So once you hit that date, you get an urgency boost. It shows up higher on your task list. Scheduled tasks will also hide tasks which you haven't reached yet if you use the task ready report, which I use. So scheduling a task for me also hides it from the usual report that I look at, which means I'm not worrying about scheduled tasks, which I know that I'm doing later. There's another thing we can do with dates as well. We can have an until statement. An until statement says that if I haven't done the task by this date here, if I've been a bad son and I haven't sent my dad a birthday card 10 days after I meant to, well, it's probably too late. It's going to be weird if I send one at this point. So until says if I reach this date, I will automatically delete the task. Now, I'm trying to get better at using this. I'm trying to get better at whenever I enter a task to say, you know what? If the task has been sticking around for like more than a year, I'm probably never going to do it. It should delete itself. The other neat thing which you can do with all of these date commands is you can use relative dates. So I could write something like this. Send dad a birthday card. Here is when it's due, and things as you get closer to the due date get more urgent. It's scheduled. I want to send the card 3 days before the due date, so 3 days before my dad's birthday. I don't want to even see the task until 6 days before my dad's birthday. And if it's 3 days after my dad's birthday and I still haven't sent the card, well, we can just delete this. I also want to note that that's not actually my dad's birthday. I'm not going to dox my dad on stage. You can also, besides from saying things relative to the current task, you can also do dates relative to other tasks. So you might have something like a conference, and TaskWarrior lets you search using regular expressions, if that is your thing. So I can say, T is my alias for TaskWarrior on my shell. So if I write task/conference IDs, it says, please search for a task with conference in the name and give me back its ID. So that's ID number 8. And then I can say, hey, I want to book some flights, and I want to be booking my flights 30 days before the conference starts. And if I haven't booked my flights by the time the conference has started, well, I'm probably not going to the conference. I should probably be auto-deleting that. Now, that looks like it's a lot of fiddling around, but it's amazing for scripting. This is one of the best things for if you have something where you have the same set of tasks you do every time. So I do a lot of computer training, and every time I do a computer training class, I need to book a hotel, I need to book flights, I need to print course manuals, I need to get stationery. There's all these things I need to do. It's perfect for that because I can have everything relative to when I'm delivering that course. The other thing which dates leads into is this idea of urgency. So TaskWarrior has an idea of how urgent something is, how important it is that I be doing that right now. And as we know, some tasks are more important than others. Now, this is a calculated value. Rather than me explicitly saying this task is more important, TaskWarrior takes into account its due date, the scheduling information, what projects it's a member of, all of those things, and it calculates an urgency. And of course, you can give it rules on how those calculations should proceed. So if something happens to have a due date, if task number 2 happens to be due in 7 days' time, then when I look at all of my tasks, that task is going to have a higher urgency because it has a due date and it's soon than a task without a due date. Tasks will also gain very slightly in urgency as they get older. So TaskWarrior will try to get you to do old tasks before new tasks. As I mentioned, it's calculated, and it takes into account tags, projects, deadlines, and what I'll show you in a moment called priority. All of these things give you more urgency. So it's very configurable. Here's a section from my TaskWarrior RC file. I can say urgency user tag costly. So if I have a costly tag that I've tagged something with, then it has a coefficient of 3. It gets 3 more urgency points than something that was without that tag. So if I give something a costly tag, it's going to be bumped up higher on my to-do list. If something is in my fun project, if something is something like, watching a cat video on YouTube, well, it doesn't get a coefficient because that's obviously something which is not important, but I still want to track it. And of course, if I show a task information, if I ask for information on a task, not only does it give me all this information up here with its tags and virtual tags and everything, it also gives me the urgency calculations down the bottom. So I can see how urgent it is and why it thinks it's that urgent. One thing which you might be able to see down here is it has a little section which says UDA priority H. UDA stands for user-defined attribute. And in this case, it's been marked as a high priority. It gets an extra 6 points from that. So what is this priority thing? Well, most people understand other task management systems where you can sort things to say, this is low priority, this is medium priority, this is high priority. TaskWarrior has the same idea. It has a field which you can define how the field works, but by default, it has H for high, L for low, M for medium. So I can say, hey, task 42 is a high priority task. It gets a bonus to urgency. I can also shorten that to just PRI if I want. TaskWarrior lets you use shortcuts in almost every command. Now, by default, TaskWarrior says that your urgencies are high, medium, low, and then none, which is the default. And this doesn't make sense to me. If I tag something as a low urgency task, I expect it to show up lower on my task list rather than higher on my task list. Now, you can get around this by saying that all tasks start with a low urgency, but you can also just reorder these if you want to. So I've said that tasks have high, medium, default, and low priorities. And the way in which I do that in my TaskWarrior RC file is I simply say UDA, my user-defined attributes, my priority attribute, and my values are going to be high, medium, the empty string, and low. If I wanted to call these something else, if I wanted to call them catastrophic, critical, important, meh, and unimportant, I could have those as priority values if I wanted to. I've also modified low to have a 0 coefficient. It adds no urgency, and the default adds an urgency of 1.8. which is the reverse of what they used to be before. I can also, if I want to, have dependencies in TaskWarrior. So let's say that I wanted to make pumpkin soup. Well, I could have a task which is to buy a pumpkin. That's task number 12. And then I can have a task which is make pumpkin soup, which depends upon number 12. And so this won't show up on my task list until task number 12 is completed. One of the coolest things about dependencies is that I can set a switch urgency inherit on, which says that if you have a task and things which depend upon that task, those subtasks will inherit the parent urgency. So if I have something like I'm going to a conference and the conference is tomorrow, so it's a very, very urgent task, and I need to book a flight, and going to my conference depends upon me booking that flight will inherit the high urgency from that parent task. So this is really, really useful if you're me. And in fact, I will often do things where I have one task where I can sort of modify the urgency or the priority of that, and it will cascade down to everything else in that project. TaskWarrior is also an incredibly extensible system. It comes with a lot of tools and plugins which you can use. One of my favorite is called TaskOpen. And what TaskOpen does is it opens resources that you've stored in annotations. So if I've made a task to track my tooth flossing on BeMinder, which is an absolutely fantastic website that charges you money if you don't achieve your personal goals. So I've got a task which does that. I've annotated that with a link to BeMinder, and I then say TaskOpen 12. It'll say, oh, you have a URL in that annotation. I will open up a web page, and in this case it's BeMinder, so it will open up the BeMinder web page. I can have a task to finish some report, and I can link that to an Excel spreadsheet. And then if I write TaskOpen 13, if I open up that task with TaskOpen, it will open up LibreOffice because I happen to be on a Unix system, a Linux system. Or it will open up whatever is appropriate for that type of file in my MIME types file. One of my favorite things is that I can simply annotate something with the word notes. And if I task open that and it sees just the word notes there, it opens up my favorite editor, Vim. And I can now take as many notes as I want with that task. And this is like 90% of my life, is having a big sort of document of notes which I'm recording against a task. It also has lots and lots and lots of other options. There's an enormous number of things you can do with TaskWarrior, with TaskOpen, but I don't have time to show them all to you here. I do, however, want to talk more about how to work with others. And this is the best cosplay I've ever seen. It's from Comic-Con a number of years ago. It's fantastic. So there is a killer piece of the TaskWarrior ecosystem called BugWarrior. And what BugWarrior does is it synchronizes remote trackers with TaskWarrior. And when I first discovered this, this is my face. This is pretty much my reaction. It's like, oh my goodness. And I was looking through the list of things it synchronizes. And right at the top of the list, it works with GitHub, it works with Trello, it now works with Gmail, it works with Jira. All of these things which I was using at the time. But also all of these other things which people have written plugins for. So what this means is if you happen to have a task on GitHub or on Jira or an email in your inbox, you can have all of those tasks, all of those things in one place. They can all be managed with TaskWarrior. And I set this up and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like heaven. This is something I've wanted my entire life. This is like heaven if heaven consisted entirely of overdue emails and critical bugs. So this is something which just has absolutely sold me on TaskWarrior. The way in which you set it up, BugWarrior is a plugin. It's an open source plugin. And you create yourself a BugWarrior RC file. And then inside that, it's simply like a .ini file, essentially. You have a number of sections. So I can say, okay, I've got a GitHub section, and it uses the GitHub service. Here's my login. Here's a token, which of course is secret that I'm not going to show you. And then it will go off and it will find every task that I've been assigned on GitHub and will create a TaskWarrior item for me. I use Trello for a lot of cooperative projects. Trello is something that a lot of people who don't have a technical background feel very comfortable working with. So I can say, okay, here's one of my old projects which I was working on last year called Room Service that was building an alternate reality game. My service is Trello. I give it an API key and a token. I say if something's on the done list, then really don't give it to me as a task. It's finished. And then I can say, here are the boards which I should be including. Now, this last thing is fantastic because it means that I can have multiple sections for different Trello boards. Different Trello boards can act in different ways in TaskWarrior. Now, by default, it gives you everything on a Trello board, but I only want tasks assigned to me. Well, hey, there's an option for that. So Trello only if assigned to P Fenwick. This is a configurable option, which means that if you happen to have a user that represents a team, for example, you can say, hey, only if it's assigned to that team. Or if you're a manager and you want to track tasks that your team is working on, you might have something else in there to do that. You can also say that you can want to customize the title and project and other information when it gets read into TaskWarrior. So you have these little templates which you can use here. You can say that the description template, when I create an item in TaskWarrior, is just going to be the name of the Trello card. And I'm going to say that it's going to be given the project of roomservice.trello, so I can immediately file it into a project, which is fantastic. This can get really, really handy because if I have a GitHub issue, for example, I might want to include the GitHub issue ID. I might want to include which project it's involved with because I have lots and lots of projects, and I probably want to have the title of that issue in there as well. And of course, I can do all of this with per board and per project settings. The other wonderful thing is if something gets marked done in Trello or something gets marked done in GitHub, it also gets marked done in TaskWarrior. Now, this, of course, is a one-way link. I can't say that something's done in TaskWarrior and have it auto-close in Trello or GitHub, but I can have it go the other way. The way in which I use this with Gmail, which is a fairly recent addition, is I have something which looks like this. I say that my service is Gmail, I give it my Gmail login name, and then I can have a user-defined query. So if you have lots and lots and lots of inboxes, you can quite happily have separate configurations for each of them. In my case, I use inbox.google.com, and I say if something is pinned or if something is snoozed, then I want it on my to-do list. So things only show up after I've pinned them or snoozed them. Of course, I can also manipulate the description if I want to. In this case, I want all of them to have a default name of Gmail and the subject of that the subject of that email, so I know that it's come from Gmail. The wonderful thing about this is if something gets too much, let's say you stop working for a client and you don't want to look at their Trello board anymore, you can also turn on and off services. So inside your TaskWarrior RC file, there'll be a general section where you can simply say, here are the things I want you to work with. And you can go, okay, I don't actually want you to read Gmail, or I don't want you to read something else. So I want to share a little bit of what my workflow looks like. As before, I mentioned that I use inbox.google.com. If you haven't used this, it's really, really awesome. If you're a Gmail user, Inbox does a lot to try and help you sort your tasks and get things out of your inbox. I have a little piece of code called TaskUp, and TaskUp synchronizes my tasks with what's in my email. And it does three things. It hides any snoozed tasks, so something I've snoozed in Inbox will be snoozed in TaskWarrior. It unhides active tasks, so if something is unsnoozed in my inbox, I can see it in TaskWarrior. And anything which isn't a Gmail task, it doesn't touch, it leaves alone. So it's not just a simple shell script. The first thing it does is it calls TaskWarrior pull. And TaskWarrior pull simply pulls down my inbox and creates tasks as needed. The next thing which it does, here's a bunch of code, is it runs task. It says make sure it's a Gmail task by saying if it has a Gmail URL of any sort, it's a Gmail task. Make sure it's not in my inbox. Make sure that the Gmail labels isn't inbox. So that means it's going to be a snoozed task because I'm only looking for pinned and snoozed tasks, and pinned tasks are always in my inbox. Make sure it's pending. Don't do anything if it's a deleted task or a completed task, and then modify it to remove the inbox tag. This is an actual TaskWarrior tag, and it's not in my inbox anymore, so that should disappear. And then I wait it for 7 days. Now, TaskWarrior doesn't know how long something has been snoozed for. So all I'm really doing there is saying, I'm going to deal with this in the future somehow. And when the snooze period in Gmail disappears, I run this code, which says that if it's in my inbox, which also implies that it's pinned, because everything is either pinned or snoozed with my original search, and it's currently marked as waiting, then tag it with inbox and clear the waiting system, which means that it then shows up in TaskWarrior again. So this looks complex, but it's something I only ever had to write once, and then I just write task up every day, and it updates all of my tasks from Gmail. The next thing which I do is I look through all of my tasks, and I will delete anything which looks like I'm never going to do. I'll bankrupt as many things as possible, and I will schedule tasks for when I intend to be doing them. So I'll go, okay, task number 3, I'm going to be doing in 3 days' time, and task number 7, I'm working on tomorrow, task number 1, I'm going to be doing today. And so I have this daily ritual of reviewing all of my tasks and then only looking at my current tasks, only looking at things which are due today or scheduled today. And of course, I do that with aliases. I say the today alias is things which are scheduled before tomorrow or due before tomorrow. This is slightly more reliable than saying it's due today or scheduled today, because something might have been due yesterday, in which case you still want to see it. So show me everything which is scheduled or due before tomorrow, and then I've got an alias of to, which is the same as this, and then I just write to, and it shows me all of the tasks I'm doing today. So that's how I sort of keep my focus and not get overwhelmed with tasks. And that shortlisting is absolutely the key. I have to do the reviews, and for me, daily is better than weekly. I find that I work really well with daily rituals. I don't work very well with weekly rituals at all. But there was one last hurdle that I had in terms of staying productive with TaskWarrior, and that is that I love to ignore my to-do lists because they're full of things that are hard. Like if it's something that I was enjoying, it wouldn't be on my to-do list. I would have done it already. So it's full of hard things. But I can't ignore my shell. Remember at the start of this talk, I live on the command line. I spend all my time in terminals. If something's in my shell, I have to pay attention to it. So I wrote some shell prompt integration for TaskWarrior, and this is all in my bash RC. So I started off by defining a number of variables. I've got and I use emoji for these. So I've got a variable called urgent, which is an exclamation mark. I've got a variable called due tomorrow, which is a little calendar. I've got a variable called due today, which is a screaming face. And if something is due today, that's usually how I feel. And if something is overdue, I've got a skull and crossbones. And then I've written a function called task indicator. And task indicator comes with a function that I've called, or comes with a variable called task. Why have I done this? Because I'm usually making modifications to TaskWarrior, and I might be adding a whole bunch of extra options onto this command. But all I've got is the task command there. And then I've said, hey, if I've got a task which is ready and which is overdue, and there is more than 0 of those, then I'm going to print out the overdue, that skull and crossbones. So if I have any overdue tasks, have a skull and crossbones as my prompt. Otherwise, if I've got things due today, there's more than 0 things due today, I'm going to have the screaming face as my prompt. Otherwise, if I've got things due tomorrow, I'm going to have the calendar as my prompt. And otherwise, if I've got anything greater than urgency 10, I'll have that big exclamation mark as my prompt. The reason I'm using ready there is because ready ignores waiting or hidden tasks. So if I say, oh yeah, there's this thing which is important, it's due tomorrow, but I'm not going to do it now, I can simply say wait until tomorrow to show it to me, and it doesn't show up on my prompt. The final thing of this is I put task indicator using $ parentheses, which says evaluate this every time, inside my PS1, which is my prompt for my shell number 1. I'm not exactly sure what it stands for. And I haven't shown you my whole shell prompt code there, because my whole shell prompt code is this quite long thing that gets run, that runs git commands and Debian ch roots and so on and so forth. But this is incredibly useful, because now, if there's something which is due today, I have a screaming face as my shell prompt. I can't ignore that. So I now have this continuous feedback that I need to be working on my to-do system. Now, of course, there's so much more that TaskWarrior can do. There's not enough time to show you it all, but it does a whole bunch of other things. It has graphical reports. So if you want to, you can draw these beautiful burn-down graphs, and it will give you these hilarious ideas of when you might eventually finish your to-do list, like in 10 months' time. I can have these beautiful things. This is a G-history graph. It shows me all of my tasks over time and how many I've completed and deleted and how many have been added. It will build calendars for you to show you when things are due and when things are scheduled. You can export things into YAML. It has a full document object model if you want to. You can build your own reports. You can have hooks. I have Git integration, so whenever I change or modify a task, it saves a Git commit with the task command which I just wrote. So if something goes horribly wrong, I can always roll back. There are recurring tasks, there are advanced filters, there's user-defined attributes, there's even a complete web suite for working with TaskWarrior called inthee.am. And it adds a whole bunch of stuff. It adds SMS support and iCal feeds and Trello integration and so on and so forth. And this is open source, which means you can spin up your own if you want to. So I've only covered a fraction of what you can do with TaskWarrior, but hopefully this has given you an idea of whether TaskWarrior is something which is going to be amazing for you, or something where you're like, oh my goodness, why would I ever do that? I do want to warn you, of course, if you're starting with TaskWarrior, learning will take time. There's an IRC channel, which is very, very helpful. There's lots of people on there to give you a hand. But TaskWarrior is something which I've found will grow with you, not least because you can modify it to suit your needs. So everyone, that's all I've got for today, and I've got 1 minute left. Thank you very much. Oh, if we can flip back to my other screen just before we get to there, all of my slides are online because I know that some of you will want my slides. github.com/pjf/talks is the easiest way to find it. There's a TaskWarrior directory underneath that, so you can find all of my slides online. 30 seconds left. Let's look at the questions. Question number 1, can I access tasks created on one machine from another? Yes, you can. You can have a TaskWarrior server that will synchronize tasks for you. If you want, you can also use Git, which is not quite as cool. What about CalDAV support? I'm assuming that is a calendar thing, which I'm not aware of, so I have no idea. I didn't write TaskWarrior, I'm just a very enthusiastic user. Notifications, can you have a notification pop up in the corner to say this thing is due? You could write that. It doesn't do it by default because it's not on the shell. Is it available for phones as well? You can find a port for Android. Because this is a shell-oriented system, that's not necessarily the best way to use it. I would use something like inthee.am if you wanted to use it on your phone. Does it have autocomplete for tags? I'm sure that somebody has written that. I am this close to writing it, if not. So not yet. Ask me again in 3 days' time after my flights. Is it written in plain text? JSON. It's stored under the hood in JSON. Can you show it to us? Yeah. Do I want to show you all of my private tasks? Come and grab me after the talk, rather than me having them being recorded. I've got 4 seconds left. We've held on 4 seconds. Perfect. What's the easiest way to sync tasks between multiple devices, desktop and mobile, if I don't own a web server? This is where TaskWarrior doesn't work as well as I would like. It requires that you have some sort of a task server out there to synchronize, even if it's not a web server. So that's something I would like to see better handled. But, I should say inthee.am, you can use it as a member of the public. So it's generally a bunch of enthusiasts who are like, if you want to synchronize task stuff, you can do so. So inthee.am. Can TaskWarrior do time tracking? Oh my goodness, this is such a great question. So there is a timesheet command. You can say task timesheet, and it shows you all the tasks that you've finished in the last week. There is also a companion project called TimeWarrior. And TimeWarrior is used for tracking your time, and it integrates with TaskWarrior. So yes, there is part of the ecosystem there. There's also a million Vim tabs and everything. Can you easily open browser tabs like GitHub issues from the TaskWarrior CLI? Yes, you can if you're using TaskOpen. So TaskOpen, and you give it the task, and if it's got an annotation, it opens it up. And have I tried Emacs org node? No, I haven't. Everyone tells me it's wonderful. But I discovered TaskWarrior, and it's got a Vim plugin, and I happen to be a Vim user, so I've never looked back. Everyone, thank you so much. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for my incredibly fast rate of speech. I've got 1 second left, so have a wonderful time. Thanks for having me at Craft. Thank you. Whew.